Göbekli Tepe. The year is 9600 BCE. You are standing on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey. Agriculture has not been invented yet. Writing doesn't exist. Civilization, by every definition your history teacher ever gave you, is still 4,000 years in the future. And yet you are staring up at 20-foot stone pillars carved with lions, foxes, and vultures arranged in perfect circles, forming a temple complex so deliberately engineered it makes your hands go cold. Someone built this, and then deliberately, inexplicably, they buried it. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt discovered the site in 1994 after a Kurdish shepherd reported unusual stones on the hill. What Schmidt spent the next 2 decades uncovering rewrote the definition of civilization itself. Radiocarbon dating confirms construction between 9,600 and 8,200 BCE, making Göbekli Tepe 11,600 years old. 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid combined. The T-shaped limestone pillars reach up to 5.5 meters tall and weigh between 10 and 20 tons each. The nearest quarry is 500 meters away. At least 20 circular enclosures exist across the site, and only about 5% has been excavated. In 2017, researcher Paul Burley published Analysis in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, proposing that Pillar 43 encodes a star map marking a comet impact around 10,950 BCE. Most strikingly, around 8,000 BCE, the entire complex was deliberately buried under tons of rubble, not by enemies, not by time, but by its own builders. No cooking fires, no human remains, no evidence of habitation. Archaeologists broadly accept Göbekli Tepe as a genuine ritual site built by mobile hunter-gatherers with more organizational capacity than previously assumed. The mainstream view holds that with sufficient religious motivation, small bands can achieve large-scale construction over generations. But that explanation quietly absorbs an enormous problem. Building this required surveying, symbolic abstraction, and the coordination of hundreds of workers, skills the standard model says only emerged after settled civilization. You don't accidentally discover organized religion and monumental architecture simultaneously on the same hill 6,000 years before Egypt. Some researchers ask whether Göbekli Tepe isn't the beginning of something, but the remnant of something far older. And if so, what were its builders trying to hide, and from what? From the buried hills of Turkey, we cross an ocean and a continent to the roof of the world, where stone was shaped in ways that defy the tools of any known culture. Puma Punku. Imagine you are a stonemason with no steel tools, no machinery, and lungs working at altitude so thin it makes you dizzy. Your task is to cut a rock harder than iron, andesite, into 8-shaped interlocking blocks with tolerances so precise that no gap can be found between them, even today. Now explain how, because nobody can. Puma Punku sits on the Bolivian Altiplano at 3,800 meters above sea level, 45 miles from Lake Titicaca, within the broader Tiwanaku archaeological zone. Spanish conquistador Pedro Tiesa de Leon surveyed it in 1549 and reported that the Inca themselves had no idea who built it. Archaeologist Alexei Vranic of UCLA has led more recent structural studies. The 8-shaped blocks are cut from andesite and red sandstone with internal geometries, precise 90-degree internal angles, perfectly flat surfaces, repeating modular shapes that are consistent with machined components. Some show drill holes of uniform diameter. The largest individual block weighs approximately 131 tons and was transported from a quarry 90 kilometers away across Lake Titicaca with no confirmed method. Andesite carries a hardness rating of 6.5 to 7 on the Mohs scale. The copper and bronze tools available to the Tiwanaku culture cannot effectively cut it. The mainstream explanation holds that the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished between 500 and 1000 CE, used stone-on-stone abrasion, ropes, and organized labor over generations to achieve the visible precision. The copper clamps holding some blocks together are cited as evidence of sophisticated but entirely conventional metallurgy. But the abrasion argument collapses on contact with the material. Abrading andesite to that tolerance using soft tools would require longer than the civilization itself existed. And the internal right-angle cuts physically cannot be reached by abrasion. You need something that rotates. Some engineers who have examined the blocks argue the cut signatures are consistent with rotary tooling. If that's true, the question stops being how they did it. The question becomes what happened to the civilization advanced enough to do it, and why the ruins look less like an ancient construction site and more like a factory floor blown apart from the inside. From mountain ruins no one can explain, we descend beneath the ocean's surface, where an entire civilization drowned before history began. The Yonaguni Monument. In 1986, a dive tour operator named Kihachiro Aratake went off course in the waters near Japan's most remote island. What he found 25 meters below the surface stopped him cold. A stepstone platform the size of 2 soccer fields with right angles, terrace levels, carved channels, and what appeared to be a road running along its base. He had found a city. Nobody knew it was there, and according to the standard timeline, it could not exist. The monument sits at a depth that was dry land during the last glacial maximum, when sea levels were 40 meters lower than today. That data is not contested. It comes from standard glaciological science. Post-glacial sea level reconstructions confirm the site would have been above water before approximately 10,000 BCE. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyu spent 15 years diving the structure and published findings arguing it is man-made, identifying at least 10 distinct architectural features across the broader Yonaguni underwater complex, including what he described as a castle, temples, and a stadium-like structure, documented in his 2006 book on the monument. The main stepped platform measures approximately 50 meters wide and 20 meters tall, oriented precisely east-west. A carved stone face with defined eyes and a mouth was photographed at depth. Similar submerged terrace structures have since been documented off nearby Kirama and Chitan in Okinawa, suggesting a broader drowned cultural zone. The dominant geological view, argued by researchers including Patrick Nunn, is that Yonaguni is a natural formation created by the right-angle fracturing typical of fine-grained sandstone accelerated by tectonic activity. But natural fracturing does not produce consistent stair-step layering rising in a single direction, nor right-angle channels cut laterally across terraces, nor an overall shape that, viewed from above, resembles an architectural blueprint rather than any documented natural sandstone formation. If Kimura is even partially correct, a structured Pacific civilization existed before 10,000 BCE and was simply swallowed when the glaciers melted. Every map of ancient civilizations is, at minimum, a map of what survived above water. How many others are still down there? But an underwater ruin is one thing. What about a city that humanity's oldest sacred texts named and described for 5,000 years before anyone found proof it actually existed? Dwarka. For 5,000 years, the Mahabharata described a golden city called Dwarka, Krishna's capital, swallowed by the ocean the night he died. For 5,000 years, scholars called it mythology. Then in 2001, marine archaeologists lowered sonar into the Gulf of Kampat off the northwestern coast of Gujarat, India, and found it. Grid-planned streets, stone foundations, geometric structures covering 9 kilometers of seabed. Dwarka is real. and it is far older than the mythology that remembered it. The National Institute of Oceanography of India detected anomalous acoustic signatures during routine pollution surveys. Subsequent dives confirmed large geometric structures on the ocean floor. India's Minister of Science and Technology officially announced the discovery. Carbon-14. Dating of wood samples recovered from the site returned a date of approximately 7,500 BCE, making Dwarka roughly 9,500 years old, predating the Indus Valley civilization by nearly 4,000 years. Side-scan sonar imaging revealed what the NIO described as well-built geometrical structures consistent with planned urban construction. Geologist Glenn Milne's sea-level modeling confirms the Gulf of Khambhat was dry land before approximately 7,500 BCE, aligning precisely with the carbon date. The Mahabharata describes Dwarka as having a grid layout, 7 harbors, and broad tower-lined roads, a description that maps onto the sonar data with uncomfortable specificity. The Archaeological Survey of India has been cautious, noting the site requires systematic excavation before any urban civilization claim can be confirmed. Skeptics argue the geometric forms may be natural, and carbon dates could reflect deposited organic material rather than human artifacts, but a site potentially 3 times older than the earliest known civilization has received no full-scale underwater excavation in the 24 years since its discovery. The silence is its own kind of answer. If the Mahabharata was preserving a real memory, not myth, then how many other ancient epics are GPS coordinates to buried worlds we haven't looked for yet? From the drowned coastlines of India, we go underground, beneath the volcanic plains of central Turkey, where another civilization didn't hide beneath water, but beneath the earth itself. Derinkuyu. In 1963, a man in Cappadocia knocked through a wall during home renovations and found a tunnel. The tunnel led to a room. The room led to another tunnel. That tunnel led downward, 18 floors downward, into a subterranean city large enough to house 20,000 people, complete with ventilation shafts, wine cellars, stables, oil presses, schools, and rolling stone doors the size of millstones. No one knew it was there. No one knows who built it. Derinkuyu descends approximately 85 meters into the volcanic rock of Nevşehir province. The Turkish Department of Culture confirmed it as one of approximately 36 underground cities in the Cappadocia region, but Derinkuyu is the largest and deepest. At least 52 ventilation shafts connect every level to the surface, maintaining breathable air throughout, some doubling as wells, indicating sophisticated hydraulic planning. The circular stone doors weigh approximately 600 kilograms each and feature a central hole that allows defenders to use a spear against attackers while sealed inside, meaning the doors were designed against a specific, organized threat from outside. The city is connected by a tunnel reportedly 9 kilometers long to a second underground complex, Kaymaklu, implying a planned network, not isolated construction. No founding inscription, no builder identity, and no construction record of any kind has been found anywhere in the complex. Most archaeologists attribute the earliest phases to Phrygians around the 7th or 8th century BCE, with expansion by early Christians fleeing Roman and later Arab persecution. But the Phrygian attribution is assumption. No Phrygian inscriptions or artifacts have been found in the deepest original levels. And the ventilation engineering required to keep 20,000 people breathing 85 meters underground isn't a panicked response to occasional raiders. It is the work of engineers who understood fluid dynamics and long-term planning at a level that fits no known culture of the era. The stone doors lock only from the inside. So whatever these people feared, it was coming from above. From a civilization that sealed itself underground, we crossed the entire Pacific to an island in Micronesia, We're a civilization built not below the earth, but on top of the open ocean. Nan Madol. You need to build a city. Your island has no flat land, so you construct it on the reef itself. 92 artificial islands rising from open water. Your building material is basalt, volcanic columns weighing up to 250 tons each. Your quarry is on the opposite side of the island with no road connecting it to the coast. And your entire culture's oral tradition says the stones were moved by a sorcerer who made them fly. Historians call that a legend. Engineers who have studied the transport problem say it's the only explanation they haven't been able to disprove. Nan Madol, off the eastern shore of Pohnpei Island in the Federated States of Micronesia, was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2016 and placed on the list of World Heritage in danger the same year. The site covers approximately 83 artificial islands across 18 square kilometers of tidal lagoon built from an estimated 750,000 metric tons of basalt. Individual columns at the main mortuary complex reach 7.5 meters high with walls 5 meters thick. Archaeologist William Ayers of the University of Oregon conducted major surveys establishing radiocarbon dates suggesting construction activity from as early as the 1st century CE, with major development by 1200 CE. The Saudalur dynasty's oral histories record that the city's twin founders, Olisippa and Olosopa, arrived from a distant land and raised the stones through supernatural means. No quarry tools, transport ramps, or construction infrastructure have ever been found along the route from the source outcrop to the building site. Not a single dropped column has been located on the seabed after decades of underwater survey. Mainstream archaeologists propose bamboo raft transport during calm seasonal swells, organized over generations of tribute labor. But experimental archaeology has never successfully floated a 250-ton basalt column by any raft method in open Pacific conditions. Some researchers ask whether the Saudalur founders arrived from a culture more technologically advanced than the island, and whether the knowledge that built Nan Madol vanished with the dynasty when it collapsed in 1628. The city didn't seem to grow from Pohnpei. It seems to have arrived there. From a city built impossibly on the ocean, we move to the Sahara Desert, where a geological formation 50 kilometers wide matches the physical description of the most famous lost civilization in history, down to the measurements, the Richa structure. Around 360 BCE, Plato described a lost civilization in precise detail. It sat beyond the Pillars of Hercules, past Gibraltar in the Atlantic. It had a central hill surrounded by alternating rings of land and sea. The outer region measured roughly 50 kilometers across. The entire civilization was destroyed in a single catastrophic day and swallowed by the sea. For 2,000 years, everyone called it a philosophical allegory. Then someone looked at a satellite image of the Sahara and saw the concentric rings, and then they read Plato's measurements again. The Richa structure on the Adrar Plateau of Mauritania has a visible outer diameter of approximately 50 kilometers with distinct concentric ring formations visible from orbit. It was first photographed during NASA's Gemini 4 mission in 1965. Geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University and researcher Randall Carlson have both analyzed the site in the context of Plato's description in the Critias, noting that the concentric ring geometry, the central elevated plateau, and the broad plain to the north all correspond to features Plato specifies. Schoch has identified sediment layers in the surrounding region consistent with a massive marine incursion at the end of the last ice age circa 9,600 BCE, the exact date Plato assigns to Atlantis' destruction. The African humid period, confirmed by mainstream climate science, establishes that the Sahara supported lakes, rivers, and large human populations between approximately 11,000 and 5,000 BCE, meaning the region was both habitable and coastal at precisely the time Plato's account requires. Carlson has documented chevron dune formations extending inland from the West African coast consistent with tsunami-scale marine flooding at the end of the Younger Dryas. Mainstream geologists classify Richat as an eroded geological dome formed over 100 million years. Most classical scholars consider Atlantis a philosophical invention, but Plato's account names its sources, Egyptian priests at Sais, and provides specific dates, specific measurements, and precise architectural detail. Allegories don't need to be 50 kilometers wide. Some researchers simply ask, what if the most famous lost civilization in Western history has been visible from space for 60 years and we've been looking in the wrong ocean? From a desert that may have swallowed an entire civilization in floodwater, we cross the Mediterranean to a tiny island where a civilization vanished without flood, without conquest, without leaving a single written word behind. Hagar Kim and the temple builders of Malta. They built temples older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids. They carved some of the oldest human sculptures in recorded history. They oriented their buildings with astronomical precision to capture the exact angle of the summer solstice sunrise. And then, around 2500 BCE, they ceased to exist. No invasion, no mass graves, no fire, no conquest. A sophisticated culture built the oldest freestanding stone structures on Earth, and then walked off the stage of history entirely. We don't know their name. We don't know their language. We have never found a single written word. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest phases of Hagar Kim at approximately 3600 BCE, 1,000 years before Stonehenge and 500 years before the Great Pyramid. Archaeologist David Trump spent decades on Malta and documented the temple culture extensively. The Mnastra Temple's lower court is oriented so precisely that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun illuminates a central altar stone directly. An alignment requiring careful astronomical survey and site planning. The coralline limestone blocks used in construction weigh up to 20 tons, quarried on an island no larger than 316 square kilometers with no confirmed draft animals during the Neolithic period. Beneath the island, the hypogeum, a mortuary complex carved 12 meters into bedrock, contains a main hall with acoustic properties that amplify male voices in the 110 Hz frequency range, a phenomenon documented by researcher Paolo De Bertolis of the University of Trieste in 2014. Around 2500 BCE, the temples were abandoned, and an entirely new population arrived with different pottery and burial practices. Not a continuation, but a complete replacement. Mainstream archaeologists propose agricultural overextension on a small island, deforestation, soil erosion, population crash, followed by Bronze Age migration. But a food crisis produces mass graves and skeletal evidence of malnutrition. Malta's temple period ends with tidally sealed temples and deliberately placed offerings. This doesn't look like collapse. It looks like departure. Some researchers have suggested the temple builders were remnants of a pre-flood Mediterranean culture that retreated to the islands as sea levels rose, and that their disappearance around 2500 BCE was simply the final chapter of a much longer erasure. Malta's temples may be the last pages of a story whose beginning is still underwater. Yeah, from a Mediterranean island where a civilization vanished, we crossed the entire Atlantic to the Pacific coast of South America, where a civilization we almost missed was building pyramids at the exact same moment as Egypt, and we didn't acknowledge it for most of the 20th century. corral. While the Egyptians were raising the Great Pyramid, while the Mesopotamians were drafting the first written laws, a fourth urban civilization was rising in total isolation on the other side of the planet, building 6 monumental pyramids and a sunken circular amphitheater in a coastal desert valley where almost nothing grows. They had no pottery. They had no written language. They had no weapons of war. And they had been running a complex regional society for 200 years before anyone else in the Americas came close. We ignored them for most of the 20th century. The establishment simply didn't want the timeline to bend that far. Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis began systematic excavation at Corral in the Supi Valley in 1994 and published landmark findings in Science magazine in 2001, confirming it as the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Carbon-14 dating of reed bag carrying tools found in construction fill return dates of 2627 to 2000 BCE. The largest pyramid, the Pyramid Mare, covers an area of 160 by 150 meters and rises 18 meters, comparable in volume to major Egyptian pyramid complexes of the same era. Across the broader Norte Chico cultural zone, approximately 30 population centers operated simultaneously across 4 river valleys covering 1,800 square kilometers, implying a unified governing structure of regional scale. No weapons, no mutilated bodies, and no defensive walls have been found anywhere in the Norte Chico zone, suggesting a civilization that managed urban complexity without organized conflict for centuries. In 2005, Shady Solis recovered a quipu, a knotted string recording device, from Corral, making it the oldest known quipu ever found. Around 1800 BCE, Corral's structures were deliberately buried at abandonment, not looted, not burned, but intentionally entombed in a pattern almost identical to Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 miles away and 7,000 years earlier. Mainstream researchers explain Corral's rise through the protein-rich anchovy fisheries of the Peruvian coast, which freed populations from full agricultural dependence and allowed social complexity to develop. The absence of warfare is attributed to resource abundance and geographic isolation. But deliberate burial of monuments is not a behavior that resource abundance explains. And a civilization sophisticated enough to manage 6 pyramid complexes across 4 river valleys without writing and without war doesn't fit any developmental model currently in use. Ruth Shady Solis spent 2 decades fighting for Corral to be acknowledged, which raises the harder question: how many others are still waiting for someone willing to look? And then there are the ones that leave no pyramid, no sunken city, no geological formation. Just rooms, 24 enormous hand-carved rooms in China that someone forgot to mention in 3,000 years of written history. The Longyu Caves. In June of 1992, a farmer named Wu Anai decided to drain a pond near his village in Zhejiang Province, eastern China. He ran pumps for 17 days. What appeared at the bottom was not rock or silt. It was a carved room. He drained a second pond, another room, then another. 24 in total, each one enormous. Some covering up to 3,000 square meters of floor space and rising approximately 30 meters from floor to ceiling. Every surface, floor, ceiling, every wall was covered in parallel chisel marks running at precisely 60 degrees. Not a single word about the construction, the purpose, or the builders of these caves appears in any Chinese text from any dynasty, from any era of recorded history. A Chinese-Japanese joint research team was unable to produce a definitive construction date due to the consistent tool marks obscuring datable surfaces. The total volume of rock removed across the 24 caves is estimated at approximately 1 million cubic meters, equivalent to filling the Great Pyramid. Yet no spoil heap, no secondary use of the stone, and no debris field consistent with this quantity has been identified anywhere in the surrounding region. Structural columns were left in place during carving to support the ceilings, demonstrating knowledge of load distribution in rock mechanics. The 60-degree chisel angle is geometrically consistent across every surface in every cave, indicating a standardized construction protocol applied uniformly across the entire project. The Chinese government conducted investigations. Archaeologists arrived, and no one could explain it. The mainstream suggestion is that the caves may date to the Qin dynasty around 200 BCE or earlier, possibly serving as quarries or storage facilities, with records lost to Emperor Qin Shi Huang's burning of historical texts in 213 BCE. But the first emperor's purge targeted literary and philosophical texts. Technical and agricultural records were specifically exempted. A project requiring thousands of workers and producing 1 million cubic meters of debris would generate practical documentation, supply records, labor conscriptions, land use orders that would have survived. They don't exist, possibly because whoever carved these rooms had already been gone for a very long time before Chinese written history began. The 60-degree angle isn't a casual labor preference. It distributes stress evenly across a curved surface. That is an engineering decision. And someone made it, then vanished so completely that even the memory of them vanished too. 10 sites, 5 continents, thousands of years separating them. And the same pattern emerges across every single one. Structures that shouldn't exist by any known timeline, built by people who shouldn't have had the knowledge to build them, then buried, drowned, sealed, or simply forgotten. The mainstream explanations for each individual site are possible. But the accumulation is the problem. Coincidence doesn't scale. At a certain point, the anomalies stop being footnotes and start being the actual story. Most people move through history accepting the timeline they were handed, and they see dusty ruins. You follow the evidence past the point where the textbooks end. You notice the pattern. That is exactly what this channel exists for. Hit subscribe and make it official. Then go to the comments and tell us. Which one of these 10 breaks the timeline hardest for you? Defend your answer. Let's see who builds the strongest case. History is not a straight line, it is a series of erasures. Every civilization before us looked up at the same stars, built toward the same sky, and left behind the same silent question. We are still asking it.